Hi Techie guys, I'm Nandkishore Swami and today we'll be learning about how to automate a Windows-based application. So when I say Windows-based application means application is already installed on your system and now we're gonna automate it through Pega Studio. So for this particular video, I'll be using a video from Pega system itself. Becky has created this video, and Becky is a product manager there in Pega system. So let's get started.
I'll start right with the quick start capability. So as I hit the let's go button, it brings up this wizard, gives me an opportunity to name my automation and the use case that I'm building. And I'm going to call it customer lookup. And now I can add in the application that I'm working with, and it's called Banker Insight. Banker Insight is a legacy CRM application in my environment. So I'm going to go to my drive and enter in the path where the file can be found. And the automation that I'm going to create, let's call it lookup. When I hit the launch recorder button, it takes me directly into intelligent recording mode. It brings up my recording assistant and it brings up the application that I'm working with. Let me go ahead and organize my screen a little bit so it's easier for us to look at. As I hover over the login page, you can see these green gears show up. These green gears tell me that I can just enter values directly into the text boxes. Applications that use X-ray vision will have the green gear, as will applications that are already interrogated. Other applications will have a blue gear, and interrogation happens automatically as I click on the gear and open the step editor. Okay, so with version 22.1, along with X-ray vision for .NET, WPF, WinForms applications, we've added X-ray vision for Edge and Chrome apps too. Of course, X-ray vision speeds the process of interrogation and the robustness of the bot that you've created, since we're constantly watching how those controls are identified, always making sure we're using the best attributes to find a unique match. I'm going to go ahead and enter in my user credentials. And you can see a lot of things just happened on screen. So let's talk about these one at a time. I'm going to stop the recording. And let's analyze these steps. Every time I entered interacted with the application, a new step was recorded. This first step is setting text of Becky into the username text box, and then setting a password and hitting the perform click on the button. So let me edit these steps. And this gives me the ability to take it from a constant input value into an input parameter, because I don't want every single time that somebody uses this automation to be logging in as Becky. So let me hit create new. And now the value will be coming from the username parameter. And I'll do the same for the password. Notice that this gets created as sensitive data since it identified that that text box, that password text box, had masked characters on it. Okay, and now I have my username and my password, so I can test these steps. And that performs the login just like I would expect it to, and everything works like I'd want it. So I'm going to close the test mode. Now let's talk about this green box around the steps that says login detected. Basically, a login automation is an automation that we really want to encourage our users to reuse and make into a reusable component. So by identifying that login, we're pointing out to our user that, hey, this is something that you want to take advantage of and use again and again. So I'm going to move these 3 steps into a new automation. I'm going to call it login. And as I do so, a lot of things that are going on in the background here. So let me bring this up and show those off. Our original automation that we created in that wizard at the beginning is called lookup. It now has an entry point with 2 input parameters, username and password. And this automation calls a sub automation called login. Now, this is where the magic happens. This is where we're taking the input parameters and pushing them into the username and the password text boxes, and where we're performing that login. Okay, so now let's head back to the application and we'll do another recording. I'll hit the record button, come over, And I'm going to enter in a customer number and press the search button. And you can see those steps were recorded for me. I'll hit stop and I will edit the step, switch it over to an input parameter. And then test. Now, last time I entered an input parameter or I entered a customer number that ended with a 1. This time it ends with a 2. I'll hit test again. My new customer number is there and that customer was found. And I'm going to take these steps and move them to a new automation. And we'll call it search. And you can see that the search sub-automation was added in, and we have a new input parameter on our entry point called customer number. And here is the search automation. I'll finish recording, closes my application. I can bring this up. So onto their palette that they weren't using in their painting. Our palette just really minimizes the things, and we don't add things to the palette unless they're being used. So if there's other automations in my project, other applications, other forms that aren't being used on this automation, I'd be able to come and add them in here. Another thing that's really cool in version 22 is our toolbox. We took away all of the utility components like string utils and date time utils. Instead, we have placed all of those methods directly onto the toolbox, and I can search for a method, find the one that I want to use, and just drag it on directly like that. So it's a lot easier to get access to things. Another thing that we've done is we've added the select action dialog. So as I pull a control onto the automation surface, you can see this select action dialog pull up. This shows the most recently used and the most commonly used properties, methods, and events for this control type. I can also click the More button and find other property, methods, and events for the control. And it's also really got some great search utilities. If I type in, click, you can see that there's 17 methods that use that word. And if I keep going, it brings me directly over to the 3 events that use the term clicking. So one of the major advancements we made in V22 is we added this test capability. We still have the run, and the run is what you're familiar with from previous versions, where it would take the entire project and compile it, and you'd basically start debugging from the very beginning. But with test mode, what you're doing is you're debugging the current automation you're on plus any sub-automations. And it also gives me the ability to add in my input parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my username and a customer number. I've got my start applications before testing checkbox checked, so my application will start running for me if it's not already. I'm stopped right here at a breakpoint. You can see the application came up. Let me slide this down again and bring the app up, and we'll start debugging it. I've got step in, step out, step over. So I'm just going to step through this. And you can see the values that are placed into the text box are right here, directly visible on the block. Also, another really cool feature is that we are automatically identifying any sensitive data. So this password text box, we noticed when we were in our recording mode earlier that we identified that as sensitive data, and this control is considered inherently sensitive. And this is really great, so we can make sure that these values never appear on the automation surface or in a log. So that's a great capability. Also, if you have any other PII, any other fields where they're not marked out, where they're not starred out, you can mark them as sensitive so that they will also not appear. They'll be treated just like these guys. So now we're in our search automation. Or coming to our search. Now we're in our search automation, placing the values up there and searching for our customer. Now I can check close running applications, or I can not check it. And I'm just going to choose to leave my running application up. And this lets me highlight the best capability of test mode. So earlier I described it is that we're only testing the automation you're on plus any sub automations. So if I hit test here while I have the search automation up, it's only going to debug this automation and no others. Right there, my second customer is already in place. I didn't have to re-log in again. I didn't have to start from the beginning. I didn't have to wait for that compilation step. Makes it so much easier to debug or unit test or add logic to the automation to make sure that everything is really working like you need it to. It's a reusable component that can be versioned and shared amongst all of your automation developers. So to do that, let me just show it to you real quick. Can just bring these up and deploy this asset all by itself. So this capability lets one person focus on building the interface to an application, and other people can then use that application and its automations within their own